Good morning, everyone. We are so excited for this session this morning, and I'll make sure you're in the right place. We are the only act this morning for the conference, but this is Protecting Seeds, Diversity, Maize, Mexico, and the Future of Biodiversity. We have several other activities later today, and please do check the events on your conference webpage. I'm particularly hoping folks will, while we have these really important, profound conversations, we also have some fun events, including we have a trade show question and answer at 11 today, and that's where you go if you want to win prizes. So join us in that space, meet our vendors, find out what's new for the growing season from a bunch of different companies that support seed. And then we have concurrent sessions then at noon, several great opportunities for learning and engagement there, and on to some meetups a little bit later today. And for this session and for all our sessions, we want to create a safe space for conversation. And so we'd like to share some agreements that we will be agreeing to. These are principles we agree to keep this a safe space. And so we all have a role to play in tending to this space. During this conference, we agree to speak only for ourselves and make space for others. Be as present as possible. Be aware of who is missing in each conversation. Remember that no one has a monopoly on truth, and everyone's experience is valid. Critique ideas, not people. Listen to our bodies and tend to their needs. Give some grace for technical and logistical difficulties, and give some grace for human imperfection. And with that, if you have other principles you'd like to uphold in this session, you can put those in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Kathleen McCluskey.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kara. Welcome all. Good morning, good afternoon. Bienvenido. My name is Kathleen McCluskey, as Kara mentioned. I have the honor of being the leader of the Conference Planning Committee, as well as the Outreach Director for Organic Seed Alliance. And I will also have the opportunity to be the moderator for this morning's session. A couple of housekeeping things before we get really rolling. First is that I would like to remind everybody, including the speakers, that this session is being offered with live Spanish interpretation. And so to please speak slowly and clearly for the interpretation team. Next, this session is being recorded and will only capture active speakers. So if you would prefer to not be included in the recording during the question and answer phase of our panel, you can use the chat only to participate, and you will be completely left off of the recording. A video replay of this session will be available in Organic Seed Commons later this evening, thanks to our incredible technology team, who I would like to introduce next. Our lead technology manager on this session today, hi Rebecca, is Rebecca Koronowski-Woods. She's also joined by an incredible support team at the ready. So if you are having technology issues, as Rebecca mentioned, you can email helpdesk@seedalliance.org, but you can also direct message Rebecca in the chat or simply post a message in the chat. We have lots of eyes in there. We are also joined by an interpretation team that's being led by Fonseca. Hi, Jose, thank you. And I'm joined by two co-moderators, Ana Galvez and Kara Lores, both with Organic Seed Alliance. Good morning, Ana and Kara. Thank you for being here. And so with that, we'll get started with our panel. This morning's panel, as Kara mentioned, is called Protecting Seeds Diversity, Maize, Mexico, and the Future of Biodiversity. Our panelists include Dr. Turrent, Ana Ruiz Díaz, and Ernesto Hernández López. And I'll introduce each of them before their sections, before their presentations. So to give you an overview of how the flow is going to go of this panel, we'll begin with Dr. Turrent, who will talk about the olotón corn case. He'll be followed by Ana Ruiz Díaz, who will talk about the Demanda, Colectiva, Maíz case. And finally, from Ernesto Hernández López, who will connect the two cases and talk about his work in protecting traditional seed practices. And then after our panel presentations, we'll have lots of time for question and answer. And we'll do that with a combination of chat. We'll have folks reading in chat. You can put your questions in Spanish or English. And we can also do that vocally. So we'll use the raise hand function on Zoom if you want to come off microphone and ask your questions of the panelists. I'll review that again when we get to that section. So this panel will focus on historical perspectives of two legal cases working to protect ancient seed practices and diversity as biocultural common goods, olotón and the collective corn class action lawsuit. Our panelists will discuss recent findings on olotón, a corn variety that biologically fixes nitrogen, and the array of beneficial outcomes to save farmers expenses on synthetic fertilizers and reduce emissions that disrupt the climate. The panel will also present this brief report on Demanda, Colectiva, Maíz, which has had 3 major victories since 2013. The collective in the lawsuit aims to protect corn's diversity as a human right, and is fostered by corn producers, apiculturalists, seed and human rights organizations, artists, and scientists versus transnationals in Mexico. So let's get started with our panelists. First, I am honored to introduce Dr. Antonio Turrent Fernández. Dr. Turrent earned his degree in agronomic engineering at Chapingo University in 1959 and his master's in agronomic sciences in 1962 from the College of Postgraduate Studies in Mexico. He holds a PhD in ethology from Iowa State University, which he earned in 1968. For decades, Dr. Turrent was a researcher at the Mexico National Institute for Forestry, Agriculture, and Livestock Research, INAFAP, in Mexico, where he has also served on the executive staff there, and has served as a professor at Colpos, the College of Postgraduate Studies. His studies and publications have focused on small-scale agriculture in corn's potential to achieve self-sufficiency in Mexico, as well as the protection of corn's diversity and wild relatives. He is part of the class action lawsuit that has banned permits to sow GM corn in Mexico since 2013. He's also founded and the president of and presided on the Union of Scientists Committed with Society. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Turrent.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today. And let me start with sharing my presentation. And the title is Biological Fixation of Atmospheric Nitrogen by Olotón Mije, a Mexican native maize landrace. Knowledge that maize can fix atmospheric nitrogen in significant amounts is new to science. It was first described by Ferreira Serrato et al., Colegio de Postgraduados, Mexico, in 1993, and then complemented recently by Van Daens et al. In 2018. This plant is a vigorous late season plant that can grow up to 18 feet high. Up to 14 of the phenotype's stem nodes may develop crop roots, aerial roots, which progressively exudate a transparent, dripping, mucilaginous material. This is the way it looks. Here's the aerial roots, and here's the mucilage that is dripping. The plants have a very outstanding vigor. Now, the way this phenomenon proceeds starts in the bottom node that develops this set of aerial roots. Then, but it has a limited cycle of production, and then when it ends, the next one is ready for it, and then the third one, as you can see, is going to be substituting for this one as this substituted for this one, and then here the next set of roots that will go on. Present knowledge of biological fixation of atmospheric nitrogen in maize. The mucilaginous material exudated by crop roots is rich in several polysaccharides, mainly fucose, galactose, and arabinose, that provide support to several species of nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Some of these bacteria also show antibiotic activity as well as solubilization of soil phosphorus and synthesis of plant growth promoters. Pathogenic fungi are not found in the mucilage. It contains a very low concentration of oxygen, which is a requirement of the biological nitrogen fixation process. The maize nitrogen fixation character is a same symbiosis that differs from the leguminous crop model. The former the one in maize, takes place mainly in the aerial roots, while the latter occurs in subsoil root nodules. The main bacteria, in the case of maize, the maize model, the genders involved are Azospirillum, Derxia, Beijeringia, Azotobacter. Van Daens et al. Showed in 2018 that fixed nitrogen accounts for 29 to 82% of the plant's total nitrogen requirement, and that fixed nitrogen is directly assimilated by the maize plant. The character is ancient. It is present in Teosinte, a native grass of Mesoamerica and the direct ancestor of maize. The character was introgressed into maize in the domestication process. Hence, it may be found in several of the 59 races of maize that are adapted to temperate, high elevation, and humid Sierra regions. However, the character has been amplified in the Sierra Mije as compared to Teosinte and to other maize races, probably through autochthonous maize breeding practices and seed stewardship throughout many generations of farmers. Fray Bernardino Sagun's, in the 16th century, painting of a maize plant shows the extensive prop root system typical of the modern olotón maize. This is it is a high plant, so it is divided into two parts. The important part here is these are the aerial roots that develop here. In this case, there are 6 of those nodes with the roots, and that shows that in those years, 16th century, the character was already present and known. Now, this is the way the mucilage comes out, and that's where the fixation of nitrogen takes care. And this is the reference where this presentation was taken from. Now, edapho-climatic conditions of Sierra Mije. The Totontepec location in the Sierra Mije, where samples of aerial roots and seeds were collected for study in 1992 and 2010, has an annual rainfall of 4,000 millimeters, about 300 misty days per year, and altitudes ranging from 2,000 to 2,500 meters above sea level. Plant genetics, high soil moisture, high atmospheric humidity, altitude, and limited solar radiation are very likely the defining factors of the plant phenotype and of the character. The potential economic and ecological contribution of the character. Of all the 14 essential minerals, nutrients for plant crops, nitrogen is the most important and limiting factor. The industrial synthesis of nitrogen fertilizer for 1,500 million hectares cultivated in the world consumes very large amounts of fossil energy. This represents 1 to 2% of all the fossil energy used by mankind per year, and has a proportional share as a factor in climate change. It also causes well-known ecologic and economic externalities. According to Bitting and Good from 2011, the fertilizer cost involved is around $100 billion a year. Clearly, the potential value of the factor is an outstanding process to mankind. Fertilizing the world's 330 million hectares of maize yearly planted with nitrogen is a high priority challenge for science, and that should be urgently addressed. The amplified version of the character in local maize variety would seem to be limited to the Sierra regions of Mexico. Transferring this character for the moment seems to be limited to the Sierra regions of Mexico that do not have it, and to the world regions with similar climate altitude. The symbiosis model for legume nitrogen fixation works in a variety of climates and indicates the possibility and challenge of achieving it also in maize. It will involve Mendelian genetics and molecular biology in maize and other scientific disciplines to deal with interactions with edapho-climatic conditions. The high dependence of the factor, the character, on climate conditions must be overcome. The symbiosis model for legume nitrogen fixation works in a variety of climates and indicates the possibility and challenge to achieving it also in maize. The question is whether the task should be undertaken with public or with private funds. The latter is already being pursued, given the obvious possibility of huge capital returns similar to the pharmaceutical industry and COVID-19. However, private research investment would be limited mostly to forage corn that would reduce the cost of, and that would reduce the cost of animal protein and gasoline in the first world, but would leave millions of small farmers behind. Who owns the nitrogen fixation character? The answer is first, nature, which created and passed the character to Tocintle, the direct ancestor of maize. Second, early farmers of Mesoamerica who domesticated maize and integrated the character from Tocintle to maize. And thirdly, many generations of Sierra Mije farmers who amplified the character to its current state. Who owns the nitrogen? The attempt for this, the character being pursued by private foreign capital starts at stage 3 above. So the attempt for patenting this character has already been pursued by private foreign capital. It seems obvious that whatever such patent turns out to be, the development did not start from what nature created. Rather, it built on previous achievements of Sierra Mije farmers. So whatever patenting occurs, it should be appropriately shared with these small Sierra Mije farmers. I believe that FAO should lead the effort of transferring the character to small farmers that grow maize in sierras around the world with Afro-climatic conditions similar to those of the Sierra Mije. FAO could buy the original seed from the Sierra Mije farmers and provide it directly to farmers of the candidate regions. Farmers would then do the transferring to the local varieties and or make arrangements to make transference done through national research programs. A group of colleagues from several Mexican institutions is currently working on a project financed by CONACYT, the Mexican National Council of Science and Technology. The three main objectives of the project are: one, to make formal varietal description of the local landrace and register it in the National Catalog of Vegetal Varieties in order to obtain the official title of varietal obtainer as a social entity. This is a way to defend the property rights of small farmers in patenting attempts. Second, to identify the microbiota involved in the Sierra Mije region and its contribution to the character. And thirdly, to study the genetics of heredity of the character and transfer it to landrace and mother varieties in other Sierra regions of Mexico. The Sierra Mije farmers have provided a potential service to mankind that may well contribute to food security and ecological stability. They have also shown the value of biodiversity and especially the contribution of small farmers to meeting future food challenges to mankind. In conclusion, the world search for fixing nitrogen in cereals has been given a new beginning. This is so thanks to small farmers of the Sierra Madre that used and amplified the character from Tosintli. This is now available to science and for the well-being of mankind. Maize biodiversity and small farmer stewardship of seeds are crucial for future challenges to the world food security. And thirdly, development like the maize nitrogen fixation character should be shared with equity for the good of all, and not only for the capital and power gains of the few. Thank you. This will be my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Turrent. Please join me in giving a round of applause to Dr. Turrent, either on camera or using your reactions in your emojis. Dr. Turrent, already some good questions and reflections coming through in the chat. So I'm looking forward to our question and answer. Wonderful. Well, next we are going to hear from Ana Ruiz Díaz, who I have the pleasure to introduce. Ana has a PhD in physical anthropology and is an independent advisor on organic farming and permaculture. She is the co-founder of the Vision Council Guardians of the Earth, a network of natural therapists, artists, and ecology teachers. Ana works on the class action lawsuit that banned permits to sow transgenic corn in Mexico since September of 2013 as well, and is a member of the Union of Scientists Committed with Society. I'm going to offer a little bit of an introduction to Ana's talk as well, and that is that each year, 91 million acres or 36 million hectares of maize is grown by US farmers. That's about the size of 2 Washington states in the United States, to put that into context. And of that, 92% of those acres are genetically modified and patented. The biological and sociological impacts of this monoculture are well documented and extend beyond the production region of the Midwest, including to its neighbors in Mexico. Understanding the impacts of GM corn in Mexico is particularly important to the future of biodiversity, given it is the center of domestication and ongoing diversification carried out by peasant farmers. Now, with that context setting, I'd like to pass the microphone over to Ana for her panel presentation. Ana?
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much to the Organic Seed Alliance to allow us to be here in this event. It's an honor. And I am starting to share here. Let's see if I can do this. For some reason, okay, it's not going to the beginning. Let's see. There. So before explaining our litigation against transnationals to ban transgenic corn, I want to mention the context with 3 ideas. First, over the past decades, big companies developed transgenic plants, which are genetically modified with bacteria and virus genes in order to express a toxin for larvae and insects. Nowadays, 90% of corn and soybeans are also genetically modified to resist glyphosate herbicide and absorb it without dying. However, glyphosate kills weeds, the flowers of which sustain bees and many other pollinators. Today, glyphosate residues are found everywhere in our food, bodies, water, beer, soil, etc. Unfortunately, genetically modified corn can pollinate other corn plants, and also its seeds have been patented by these companies. On the other hand, honest scientists and public servants in the USA and Europe who have urged to be cautious and put an end to the commercial production and consumption of genetically modified foods have been silenced or attacked. The power of profit is winning, and 90% of US corn is transgenic, of which Mexico imports 17 million tons every year. European citizens have said no to GMOs, and only in very few countries, such as in Spain, transgenic corn is planted. Besides, 90% of the soybeans grown in Brazil and Argentina are transgenic and end up in the food chain in Europe and all over. And thirdly, Mexico is divided into two different kinds of arable cropland. Flat land in the north, in which farmers own fields of over 200 acres and customarily use machinery and irrigation to grow corn, tomatoes, cotton, and other monocrops. And the mountainous central and southern regions, inhabited by around 4 million indigenous families who do farm small, steep plots averaging 10 acres. On 70% of the land planted with corn, peasants use native seeds. They harvest corn and edible weeds that grow on the same land, feeding 70% of the poorest families in Mexico. It is imperative to preserve these practices. It is essential to safeguard the free use, trade, and saving of diverse native seeds. These 4 million corn producers who do not have irrigation systems rely on their knowledge to time the planting and subsequent harvests to provide millions with food, including weeds that form part of the traditional diet. In other words, and emphasizing, small-scale farmers feed 70% of the Mexican population, relying on a diversity of corn varieties grown in small plots intertwined with edible weeds. Now, of the hundreds of corn varieties, each is adapted to local climate, altitude, and type of soil. And the map shows these. Farmers are not aware that transgenic corn enters Mexico without labels and can cross-pollinate with their native varieties. So what is at stake here is to gradually lose this essential genetic diversity of corn. So entering to our case, in July of 2013, a group of 53 corn producers, scientists, artists, and activists pertaining to 20 organizations defending seeds, small-scale farming, human rights, and the environment, filed a lawsuit against Syngenta, Dow, DuPont, Monsanto, and the Mexican Departments of Agriculture and of the Environment. This process has lasted more than 8 years. We, the filing organizations, refer to ourselves as La Colectividad del Maíz, or the Corn Collective. The main argument of this lawsuit is the protection of corn diversity as a human right based on the precautionary principle. 3 months after the lawsuit was filed, the courts granted an injunction banning the government from providing permits to sow GMO corn throughout Mexico. And in regard to the trial, according to the rules of procedure in Mexican courts, the judge may at any time reanalyze the elements of a lawsuit and dismiss any of them. In our case, during the first 5 years, over 90 defendants' requests to dismiss the lawsuit were denied, since 17 courts ruled in favor of allowing the class action lawsuit to proceed. During 2017, both parties presented proofs. The transnationals presented documents of their research and the Nobel Prize letter. The Corn Collective presented 4 independent scientific studies proving the transference of genetically modified DNA into native varieties of corn and referring to the potential impact if this corn were to be grown in Mexico, as well as 5 official reports demonstrating the irreversible damage caused by the transgenic contamination of corn. These studies were carried out by the National Institute of Ecology, the National Biodiversity Commission, the Department of Ecology, the National Service of Innocuousness and Safety, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer. Nevertheless, and unfortunately, the court denied our request to have impartial specialists examine the evidence and attend the hearings. So yes, the lawsuit has been allowed to continue, but we don't have specialists to verify the proofs. So to summarize, one main achievement during the trial is the injunction that bans permits to sow transgenic corn as of September of 2013. But 2 other recent victories ensued. The National Supreme Court of Justice ruled that judges in a class action can dictate any injunction to protect the rights of a collective, and ratified the cautionary measure banning permits to commercially sow GMO corn in Mexico. Both rulings were challenged in 2017 up to the Supreme Court by Monsanto and Syngenta with amparos. So finally, we all know that agricultural diversity, here's 2 slides showing the resonance of these victories in October, no? So we all know that agricultural diversity provides food security, and it's of key importance for a sustainable production of diverse nutritious crops all over the world. In this class action lawsuit, we are not asking for money. We seek to end the damage for good. And the trial is not over. Awareness from consumers and advocates in Africa, Asia, Europe, Central, South, and North America is needed. Because if we win this trial in Mexico, many other countries will also win. Given what we heard from Dr. Turrent, our previous speaker, about the olotón corn that fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere, that's showing us an infinite field of possibilities if we keep learning about corn's biology and history. And farmers all over the world growing food and seeds ecologically, organically, have knowledge that is also another huge field of possibilities to sustain the shift of the way most of our food is grown into one that does not harm Earth habitats and all its creatures. So we urge you to inform industrial corn producers and traders and your governments to become accountable for the damage to health and diversity that transgenic monocropping causes in your countries and abroad in faraway territories. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ana. Again, folks, join me in giving a round of applause for Ana. Other on camera, you can use your emojis down in the reactions button on your bottom bar too. And just a reminder that we will have time for Q&A. We've got lots of time for question and answer. But first, we're going to go ahead and hear from our final panelist presenter, Ernesto, and then we'll shift into that. But Ernesto is going to kind of tie these two cases together a little bit. So let's move on to that. I'm pleased to introduce Ernesto Hernández López from the Chapman University School of Law. Ernesto is a professor of law in the Fowler School there, which is located in California. His most recent op-eds on GMO corn bans in Mexico include Why Seed Companies Fear Mexico, published in the Interpress Service, and The Death of Neoliberal Corn, published in Latino Rebels. His work on GMO corn in Mexico has focused on history, colonialism, and environmental politics. He has also written on agriculture and the US Constitution, specific to animal welfare and farming history. His op-eds appear in the Chicago Tribune, the Interpress Service, Orange County Register, UT San Diego, La Opinión, and Hoy. Ernesto's most recent blog post, Films That Resist, examine race, gender, class, and resistance in Global South films. He earned a JD from the George Washington University School of Law, his master's with academic excellence in Latin American studies from Georgetown University, and a BA with a double major in Latin American studies and history from the University of Texas at Austin. Ernesto, with that, I will let you take it away. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Let me see if I can figure this out. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, great. Thank you everybody for being here. It's a great experience for me. I came across this topic in 2018, but the work that Ana and Antonio have been doing, as you can see, is a decade or more longer. So I'm very appreciative and honored to be speaking with them. I had participated first in a talk with OSA last year, and it was a great experience. So hopefully I can tie these things together. And I would say that the basis of my impressions appear in those two op-eds that Kat mentioned. So from a legal perspective, I try to provide some insight, but then looking forward, so I'm very appreciative of Dr. Turrent's perspective, as I would say from a lawyer, from a micro perspective, because it really shows what's at stake, what we may lose if this legal fight doesn't continue and if it doesn't become a political reality. So 2013, the Colectividad uses its class action law in Mexico that's somewhat new at the time to stop commercial permits for corn, for GMO corn. Now, this had been a struggle that had been going on since 2001 when GMO transgenes have been found in Oaxaca, even though there was a moratorium since the 1990s. January of 2021, there's a decree announcing a phase out of not only glyphosate, but GMO corn by 2024. And if you know your politics, that basically means that it's going to be at the end of this current Mexican presidency. So good politicians or politicians who know to get what they want can say, if you don't continue what I'm doing, this is going to be the problem. So if we don't continue what's going on right now, based on that decreto from 2020 that goes into force in 2024, we could lose what we've been gaining for, and I've only been at this for a couple of years, but you know, that Mexico's been fighting for centuries and these litigants for, you know, nearly a decade now. So the big moment, at least in my perspective and in the news, was October of last year when the Supreme Court approved the ban on GMO corn permits as the trial proceeds. So from a lawyer's perspective, it's like, okay, we've gained that sense of indefiniteness, but it could be undone. There's going to be a trial. Now, also important, the Supreme Court of Mexico unanimously in 2021 found that this precautionary measure was important to protect biodiversity, not to protect the other things that people complain about GMO, or biodiversity. And I think if we see things from a global perspective, that may be the linchpin of, you know, what other governments and seed companies worry about. Not that corn in Mexico, which is where corn was started, is the largest market for corn, but it needs to import corn. That's not the only thing that's at stake. What's at stake is all these other plants that people grow that, you know, feed into our biodiversity and could be protected if courts or legislatures follow what's going on in Mexico. So let me just build on a lot of what my co-panelists said from this slide. Dr. Turrent has given us a pretty good example of one of the land races in Mexico and what it can do. You know, people always say, well, GMOs are good, or, you know, maybe there's a cost-benefit analysis, but something very unique to this particular type of plant, you know, can avoid fertilizers. It can avoid a lot of the contamination. And in Mexico, you know, there's a long history of growing on these small plots where the biodiversity is intrinsic to the method of farming called the milpa, where you grow many different plants as opposed to what Ana showed us in the slide, which is these long rows and, you know, monocrop, which is efficient, which is high volume, which decreases the cost, you know, at the supermarket perhaps, but there's loads of costs all over the place for other people, and in particular from what the Supreme Court has said in October to biodiversity. So the debate so far in Mexico has been in the litigation context about GMO corn seeds in Mexico, but there's larger debates involving if GMOs corn could be put into animal feed. The decreto is still very unclear on whether that's being extended to animal seed and GMOs into processed foods. And so it's great. And, you know, it's a concern for people if we can say corn that's used in masa, corn that's used in tortillas, corn that's used, you know, for spiritual significance will be protected. But what about the corn that goes into processed foods or animal feed, or here in the United States, basically sugar? You know, most of our products now don't even contain corn, don't even contain sugar. They contain something that used to be corn that is used for sugar. So GMOs, transgénicos, are very criticized from a business perspective, which I think is very important. The concern is that the single use, that you can't save seeds, that there's, you know, serious controls to the farming methods, and from a geopolitical perspective, which is what I write about, foreigners own those legal rights, whether they're from Switzerland or China or the United States. Someone else owns those rights. And because of trade laws, or because of investment laws, or because national laws can't stand up, these foreign entities called transnacionales in Spanish have access to legal protections that wouldn't exist domestically. From a scientific perspective, the worry is that there is no scientific consensus that GMOs are safe for biodiversity. There's also no scientific consensus that they're safe to consume. And there's increasing proof that there's super weeds and other type of, non-host organisms that build up a resilience to herbicides and other sources. So when US foreign policy or when large seed companies say that science proves GMOs or gene editing is safe, there's lots of science indicating that it's not safe, and that is typically ignored by that discourse. And so one of the important things of the litigation, excuse me, since 2013 is that they prove, in a court of law, and the Supreme Court has agreed that scientifically this is not safe. So what is my focus on talking about these things is looking at if we ban GMO corn, and I try to present it here in the color of the Mexican flag. If the decreto continues, if the Acción Colectiva, is victorious in trial, comparing that to if the NAFTA update or GMOs are permitted, what is the economic debate? The economic debate is, maximizing yield or output, having a commerce in genetic information that's protected, industrial farms, or protecting sustainable agriculture. The legal issue, which is what I worry about as a law professor, is these rules, are they looking at biodiversity or are they looking at just the transfer of seeds? These justifications, are they foreign justifications? Are they, from FDA? Are they from USDA? Or are they actually protecting, and deferring to other science or maybe even Mexican regulators? Whether it's the Department of the Environment or the Department of Science in Mexico, or if it's the Department of Agriculture. Now, conceptually, this is where I think, and I'm just making assumptions here, where a lot of the participants in this conference have experience in producing seeds, growing seeds, breeding seeds. What is the assumption? What is the assumption of what the law, the politics is about? If we look at the subject, the purpose of the law, the purpose of the policy, the purpose of why we do something and why our leaders, protect or enable something. Is that subject biodiversity, or is that subject biotechnology or gene editing or an investor right or a trade mechanism? That is what needs to be changed, at least legally. Now, what the Supreme Court has said, and the Demanda Colectiva so clearly articulated, the subject, the focus, what we should do is worry about biodiversity, not worry about the loss to the exporter, not worry about the loss to the importer who, is getting Pioneer seeds or BASF seeds. No, the focus is this larger web of genetic information and plants that are, breeding new varieties. Now, how is this supported conceptually? It's supported by reifying, and this is what the Acción Colectiva has done so well, showing the seed companies that science indicates GMOs are not safe. There are transgenes. They do impact what is being done at the genetic level. They do impact because they require glyphosate or because they're super weeds. Now, legally speaking, what is the tool to do this? It's called the precautionary principle. And the precautionary principle has existed technically in Mexican law since the biosecurity law of 2005, since the Cartagena Protocol in 2003, and since the Rio Convention in 1993. But it requires either a court or it requires a political establishment to proceed with that. And it requires, a stopping of litigation. And so what the Supreme Court of Mexico has done is, through its collective action law, not through the law of biosecurity, a judge can enjoin approval, review of GMO seeds for corn. And that is a measure that's done because the science is not clear that it's safe. And, there is a huge risk, as Anna describes, of a human right, which Mexicans are entitled to, which is the right to enjoy biodiversity and a right to enjoy, from a cultural perspective, what is an intangible property, which is something that Antonio so clearly lays out, has ramifications to the current moment. It basically can fix nitrogen, but it's something that's inherited since Teosinte, which is, the grandfather of corn. So if we look at things from the trade or the seed company perspective, they try to protect the technology. They try to say that science is neutral, that actually, we're just looking at things in the lab, and there's an increase in output, and there's a decrease in labor costs. And, the law is written, whether it's the USMCA, whether it's, other laws involving trade or investment, to make precaution difficult. To say it's there, but you have to deny, or you have to refute or negate what these American exporters or United States regulators have determined. So I end this talk kind of on 3 points, indicating here some of the organizations that publish a lot of this information, in addition to what Ana described. Seed companies fear Mexico becomes a global example. Not just that GMOs are limited in Mexico, but that Cartagena protocols, precautionary principles are respected widely. That national laws, like the Ley de Bioseguridad Mexicana from 2005, is actually respected, and it controls what foreign entities do. Now, they may point to USMCA, they may point to phytosanitary protections, but there's a Mexican law saying we have a precautionary principle and we can apply that. And what they're really worried about is that a country, has autonomous, negotiations, chooses its future in terms of contracting IP controls, from controlling its agriculture and its food. In terms of precautionary measures, what foreign seed companies worry about is that GMO seeds are controlled, not permitted, not just at the center of origin or diversity like in Mexico, but because they're inherently bad for biodiversity. The worst example is Mexico, where corn is so important, where it is the center of biodiversity, and there's a demand. But it's not just something that specific and that unique to Mexico where biodiversity harms occur. Seed companies also worry about that precautionary measures could be explicitly controlling glyphosate and other future herbicides or toxic chemicals. Here we have this delicate dance of biosecurity, biodiversity, genetic corn, Mexican culture, but in and of themselves, GMOs are toxic. So we don't need something as sensitive as Mexico to have that. Seed companies worry about that. Conceptually, this is where I think we have a lot to exchange here, because me as a law professor writes about agriculture, but people who actually work with plants. Conceptually, this is the problem for seed companies. It's also a problem for U.S. foreign policy. The Biden administration has been quiet about this, but I don't think they're always going to be quiet about this. Farmers own seeds. They don't want that. They don't want farmers to own or control seeds. Farmers control the means of production. Everything that Antonio has described is, decades, centuries in the making, but it's because campesinos, farmers put in the effort to do that, whether they think it's, needed or it's culturally important, or because they're contributing to science. And the only reason corn is so diverse is because of human effort. Now, on one side, we have human effort and precaution. On the other side, we have biotechnology, intense irrigation, herbicides, and the law protecting who owns that technology, even though it's planted in the ground and it's an organism. So conceptually, what seed companies worry about is that farmers, are seen as owning that production and their labor is necessary. And then the other big thing, and this is a big complaint in the United States, you talk about precautionary measures in Europe or in many South American countries, people understand that. In the United States, most legal academics, unless they're, on the side like I am, think of the precautionary measure as being anti-innovation, as being government overreach, as it being emotional, as it being not based on science. It's not like that. The Acción Colectiva very clearly shows science proves that there's not enough science that GMOs are safe. So because of that, Mexico should be able to have a precaution to control that. Now, we have precautionary measures in the United States. President Trump and President Biden have been very, clear on precautions for who enters this country because of COVID. There's precautionary measures for all types of issues, but they're not seen as lacking science or emotional. So what seed companies worry about is that Mexico is an example for biodiversity, which isn't just something applicable to Mexico. So the Mexican example is great. I'm very appreciative to be able to talk with Antonio and Anna about this, but there's a political reality that we need to fight for in the future because laws can be temporary. And seed companies know that. That's why we're so critical of this decision in October of 2021. So thank you everybody for listening, and I'm glad to learn from the discussion.
Oh, thank you so much, Ernesto. Thank you. Everyone, please join me in giving Ernesto a round of applause, thanking him for his presentation. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Let's see, we have about 30 to 35 minutes left for question and answer. And I do want to remind folks that there's two options for asking questions. One is using the chat function, and you can put your questions in either English or Spanish, or to use the raise hand function that is on the bottom bar of your Zoom screen if you're on a computer, and that is under the reactions button. I will see your hand and you can come off mute, or you will be taken off mute and you can ask your question. I also want to remind folks, if you are going to come off mute, and also to the presenters to slow your speech down for the interpretation team, please. Ana, I see your hand up first. Ana Ruiz Díaz, so go ahead.
Yes, I want to thank Ernesto so much and Antonio Turrent for their presentations, and Ernesto's analysis really helped me out, clarified his thinking out of the box, and I really appreciate his input on this. And I just wanted to again thank that he mentioned the factor of herbicides and glyphosate, because I think what's happening with glyphosate all over the world, especially in the United States, with lawsuits that Bayer Monsanto is losing, gives us an opportunity to understand that, yes, transgenic crops are very bad, GM crops are very bad, but we have for decades explained the bad things of them. But turns out that the glyphosate they use and other conventional crops use during growing and as a desiccant before harvest is like a common denominator that is affecting us all over the world. And to me, the glyphosate issue is right now like the Achilles tendon, or like the weak link of this whole thing. So I just wanted to bring that idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana. Thank you. I see, let's see, a couple of questions in the chat. I see you too, Jeff, but I'm going to go in order as these came in. So hold on one moment. We have a question from Vanessa in the chat of what is the distance for planting corn to avoid cross-pollination with GM corn? I'm wondering, Dr. Turrent, do you have what those distances are as far as isolation? And is that something that you can speak to as far as in the context of smallholder farmers in Mexico and the realistic ability of creating isolation distances in the region? You'll need to come off mute, Dr. Turrent.
There is no way, absolutely, to protect native corn from being contaminated with transgenic corn if this transgenic corn is allowed in Mexico. There is no way. Because some of the practices of small farmers has always been to, when they travel around the country for jobs or whatever they go to, they always are in the look for plants that they can, or for seeds that they can bring back to their homes so that they will mix it with their own seed and then plant it so that they get the character that he liked when he was outside his home, and then that is what he wanted to have in his own corn. He has been doing this for centuries now, but it has been possible to do it when there is no transgenic corn in Mexico. When it is allowed to be planted, then it's not only distances, short distances, that pollen can travel from transgenic into native corn, but it is also the movement of seeds through the farmers themselves. So I think it is impossible, practically, to maintain diversity in Mexico if transgenic corn is allowed to be planted in Mexico.
Thank you, Antonio. Dr. Turrent, it's really important, the way that it's not just wind, it's not just pollinators, right? So I appreciate that answer to the question. And I am keeping an eye on the chat, so continue to add your questions in there. Jeff Bragg, I see your hand up.
Yes, I want to totally, I've been following this for quite some time, all of the legalities down in Mexico. I've worked in Mexico. I was one of 4 people that worked for the pre-Monsanto genetically modified companies. I will tell you, this is the single most important thing we need to do to take care of our health worldwide, take care of our soils. I have thousands of pictures of resistant weeds from Washington to my hometown of Jerome, Idaho, where they've destroyed the Snake River because of genetically modified corn and alfalfa. There's absolutely no reason that there was a need for any of this. And this panel brought up so many things. If you ever need anybody to help you with evidence, I know all these companies personally. I know all of the people that direct these IP rights. And I've quit and gone back to regenerative organic agriculture, and my stances on this has made it scary for me to even live. So I want to tell you, what you're doing is wonderful, because these chemical companies know no bounds, and seed companies. And I work on intellectual property rights of seed.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say thank you. I'm emotional about it.
So much. Thank you so much, Jeff. Dr. Turrent, Anna, or Ernesto, I'll pause to see if you have anything in response to Jeff's comment. No? Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. And I have a question here in the chat from Julie. Julie says, I'm interested to learn more about Demanda, Colectiva, Maíz, and what is the structure of the collective? Anna and, well, all 3 of you are involved. So she's interested in the structure of the collective, who's involved, how it came together, just to learn a little bit more, and also what the role of small farmers play in the collective.
Dr. Turrent, is okay if I answer that?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. The collective works with 3 commissions: a strategic, a communication, and a scientific commission. And in the 3 of them, we have corn producers, farmers, small farmers. We have learned to know each other, to get acquainted over the years. We have 2 yearly meetings and quarterly meetings of the 3 commissions separately. I didn't mention the legal commission, which is integrated by very few lawyers compared to the lawyers that are working for the transnationals. That's a team of over 22 lawyers. So I think that's basically it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ana. And I do want to just note, and we can pop these links in the comments as well, but the couple of op-ed articles that I mentioned in Ernesto's biography when introducing him, I did put the links in the chat, and we can reshare those as well. And I believe at the top of our Michael Lorden shared a PDF with some more details that Ernesto shared that can be helpful for folks who want to dig a little deeper. All right, I have more questions in the chat, and Daniela, I see that you did mention this in answer to Nancy, but I do want to lift it up for the panelists. Nancy asks if there's a seed bank in Mexico that is preserving the diverse landrace seed of corn from regional areas of Mexico, making sure that the seed is not transgenic.
I'd like to participate here. Yes, we have a huge bank of seeds in the country, but it is all over the country. And it is continuously making, breeding maize for the particular needs of the very different ethnic groups and a lot of Mexicans that are used to the Mexican food. So that the only way that we can preserve that is protecting that way that originates the biodiversity. Now, we also have seed banks in several parts of the world, and a collections of seed from all the land races from Mexico is available in Mexico, in the States, in Europe. However, this is a very, very, very limited diversity involved in that seed. The real diversity is what is all over the country. That is what we have to protect, and not necessarily the small what we have in the banks that has a very limited biodiversity, and that actually is being very important for developing the modern varieties of corn. And but it is not what we require in terms of maintaining biodiversity.
Thank you, Dr. Turrent. Ana or Ernesto, do you have anything to add to that? No? Okay, great. Ana Galvez, I see your hand. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much. Well, I am going to ask maybe a controversial question, and I am learning about it as we speak. And I was Googling a little bit about the olotón maize, And I see that there is like an open debate about biopiracy that involves the University of California, Davis, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, working in conjunction with a corporation here, I think in the United States. So I would like to ask to the panelists, first of all, what is, in your perspective, like the position of the government? What is the position of the Mije people? What are the people in Oaxaca that what they are asking for? And finally, and I think that this is the most important part of the question, is like these spaces that maybe we have people from those universities. These spaces give us the opportunity to have these talks and to look for solutions. So what people here in the United States, specifically working in seed in those spaces, can do to support the Mije people? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. In 1993, I already mentioned that there was a reason why this group from the Colegio de Postgraduados in Mexico was invited to witness this unusual type of corn that they used to call him the crying corn, crying because of this mucilage that drips. And he went with his team and then collected it, samples, and found the basis that helped them understand that it was there was not only activities for fixing nitrogen, but there are also activities for antibiotic activities, and then there was activity on making promoters of growth. So and that is why it made plants so vigorous. Now, this was in 1993, and this work was published. But a group from that was led by Mars, this transnational, was from a group from scientists from California and scientists from Wisconsin, went to Mexico and took samples in 2010. It is being argued that taking the samples was legal. However, we have a lot of doubts of this thing because it's also taking advantage of the lack of enough laws in Mexico to protect our biodiversity. This is something that has been going on for a long time. Another example of this is the Barbasco root, which is that is since the 16th century was used by women to protect them for conception from birth control. What they used to do was to take that root and chew it on it, and that is the way they would they control the birth control. However, these groups of pharmaceutical companies came, took it, and illegally, I suppose, or maybe legally, because there were nothing to oppose to it, legal, and they from there developed the pill that so many women in the world are using from there, and they also developed cortisone that from the very same group. Now, those are so important in the world. Who is making all the money that comes from it? Well, it was the pharmaceutical companies. What about well, I already made the story in case of corn. What are they getting from it? Nothing. Zero. The same thing could happen. So now I want to mention that originally these groups, I want to pay tribute to the group of Wisconsin that disagreed with this whole line and keeping it as a secret so that they could go and do what they wanted to do, to make patents and so on, the patent. And they did not like it, and they got out of the deal. Now, this group in Wisconsin is a group that has contacted us in Mexico, and they want to cooperate with us. And we are very much interested in that cooperation. But the group from California decided to go their own way. And they are the ones that already tried to patent the genetic code of these aerial roots. And they wanted to patent it. Fortunately, they were not accept. The patent was rejected because under the premise that they had done nothing to the original population. It was taken directly from native maize. But they will continue to work on it, and they will eventually come with patents. So that's what I was trying to I think that I covered some of your questions, but I'm not sure that I did.
Well, the last one is like, what is the position of the Mije people? What do they want?
Oh, yes. They are very angry, and they do not want, they are very much, what they did, I would think, is that they went and paid money to the county, to the president of the county, the one that was head of the county, and he allowed them to do this. And so it was personal. It was more. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it was not thinking of the people. Now the people have begun to have become that, more knowledgeable of what's going on. They know about this idea of patenting, and they are very angry. Now they even are concerned that we from Mexico want to work with them to protect them from that process, and we are finding also that situation for the people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question, Ana. Important to remember who's not here in the room with this conversation or on the panel, so appreciate it. And thank you, Dr. Turrent. I have several questions in the chat. Next, I have another question for Dr. Turrent, and this one is from Walter, who asks, could you tell us more about how your effort would transfer the trait in Mije to other areas of the world?
Thank you. We know that outside of the Sierra Mije, there are places where the same character has been found. And this has to do with farmer to farmer sending seed, interchange of seeds. So this is something that can be done if the seeds to cross are available. Now, I think, but this is a personal feeling, that a personal conviction that this is something that should be done for free for small farmers of the world. Well, not exactly for free, because there are costs. There has to be, the seed has to be paid for in the mixed area, and has to be taken to, they have to study what part of the world could be using this concept. So in the candidate regions of the world would be those that have very similar climates as we find in the Sierra Mije. It's a limited part of the whole 330 million hectares planted of corn in the world. But these are small farmers, and they would never be beneficiaries from any patent that would be developed by those companies. They would never be. Simply, they don't produce enough gains for them. So there has to be another way, like this one, I think, because FAO, I assume, that is free from commercial interests, but that has a mandate for helping people all over the world. So that's why I would trust that this would be something that would work, as long as the people from FAO would agree to do that, but not only with small farmers, but also with the national research institutions that would be able to take that seed and work with it before doing it to the farmers, or else doing the two things, the two ways, following the two ways, both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Turrent. Thank you for the question, Walter. This next question, also from the chat, is somewhat related, I think, and it comes from Layla, who asks, are there any panelists familiar with the benefit sharing mechanism in the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture? Any situations where it has worked, or if it could be applicable here with the nitrogen fixing corn varieties? I'm not sure if the panelists have familiarity with that treaty.
No.
No, Dr. Turrent? Anna, no? Okay. Sorry, Layla.
It's an excellent question. And I would like that people like Ernesto, who have a training in that area, would be interested in finding more the truth about this question.
Thank you, Dr. Turrent. And there are several other sessions to come in the schedule that I think this could be explored and this question would be relevant in. I know there's 2 sessions on Tuesday on UPOV, and there's a session on on GOSI, the Global Open Source Seed Initiative. And so, Layla, I would encourage you to post this question in the comments, as well as maybe check out the schedule for some additional, those additional sessions that might be relevant for it. Okay, we have time for a little bit more, a few more questions. Melissa Dessat mentioned in the chat that in the southeast of the US, she saw some of this in her field. Melissa, I'm paraphrasing it. Your point was higher up, but your question was that Melissa says, when I noticed the magical corn group growing in our corn last summer, I called a few organic growers I know to ask if they had ever seen this, and they all said yes. I wonder how pervasive this trait might be in older varieties that were cultivated in ways that encourage the corn to be more resourceful like a legume. I found that to be an interesting question, and I wanted to see if the panelists have any responses for that.
Yes, I would like to participate here.
Thank you, Dr. Turrent.
The search for finding ways that other crops other than legumes can do this kind of nitrogen fixation has been going on for a while, and there are many scientists involved in here, and it is interesting to know to mention now that sorghum shows some of this activity. It is very interesting because it means there was a ancestor of both lines, one that went to maize, and one that went to sorghum. And so it means that the creation of the character is very old. Somebody mentions that it could be 20 million years. So it went, and there probably is that character in sorghum, also wheat, other cereals, but it has not been amplified, just like the small farmers in Mexico did. But also learning from what is the case in corn, there could be efforts, scientific efforts, to introgress and amplify the character in other cereals. Now, other crops, I don't know much about it, but this case of the olotón nitrogen fixing, it's like has been mentioned by one of the scientists from in the paper published by Wisconsin, that is like the Holy Grail. That's the Holy Grail, what we have in the native olotón maize. So that that's something possible. Like, given that enough effort is made to find how to take more advantage of it. I want to end here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Turrent, and thank you for the question. I see Bill Tracy, you have your hand up. You want to go ahead and answer your question? Tech will unmute you.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists for the great session. This was really informative and encouraging. I just wanted to add some information to the current. I'm a corn breeder at the University of Wisconsin. I mainly work with sweet corn, but I've seen this in the mucilage in modern varieties. I've seen it in corn from all over the world. I've seen it from Southeast Asian corn. And as Dr. Turrent said, the environmental conditions are extremely important. When we have high humidity and lots of rain and high soil moisture, lots of corn does it by making mucilage. I have not measured the bacteria, but I assume that some of the bacteria could colonize. So I think it's pretty widespread. The real questions are creating environmental conditions for it to be useful to farmers. And maybe some places in the world, the bacteria might need to be introduced. I think the biggest problem is if your soils are high in nitrogen, then it's not, the bacteria probably won't colonize, or at least won't be very active.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Yes, I think that if I can mention, I'm sorry that I'm taking so much time here. And
Please,
well,
Dr. Turrent, go ahead.
I think that I explained there that in my presentation that it is an ancient character, it's in many places of the world, and it could be that in areas that do not have the social edapho-climatic conditions of the Sierra Mije, that there is this character is there. However, this character is limited in its scope. It needed amplification. This is what in the case of the Sierra Mije, the farmers were able to do. Now, the question is, could you amplify and obtain the same thing in a weather that is drier, but under irrigation? Can that be done? Well, that's a challenge. That should be tried, and I hope that many scientists of the world try to do that, to achieve it. And they can go and maybe if they have their own mazes there that show that character, okay, go ahead, work from it. Otherwise, it would be very limited to mankind, and only for the areas that we have in the Sierra Mije. But I think that the example of the legume case model, this works in different climates and more broader variety of climates than the case of maize. So nature found a way to do that, and farmers, by selecting it so that it can be done. So let's do it. But it needs scientists working with small farmers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Turrent, and all of our panelists. I know that we didn't get to all of the questions, and I am so thrilled that so many folks have so much interest in these topics and in these really important issues. We are going to wrap up. I want to give a final thank you to our panelists, Dr. Turrent, Ana, Ernesto. Thank you for sharing about the important work that you all are doing, an incredibly inspiring work, and also for just sharing all of these resources that you have with us. We will make these available in Organic Seed Commons. And I do want to, Reggie popped in the chat, something to kind of take away from this session. This Ana Galvez in her question made a very powerful statement that corn diversity is a human right. And that's something that's sitting with me that I'll be reflecting on and walking away today as I continue to think how we can engage with the work that's being done that was presented today. So with that, we are going to wrap up. I want to remind everyone that the trade show is up next. I've popped in the chat the link to get there through Organic Seed Commons. You can launch the Zoom. We'll start at the top of this hour. And let's give one final round of applause for the panelists and all the excellent questions with the engagement from everybody who participated. I appreciate all of your time and hope you enjoy the rest of your day today. We'll see you around.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.